Welcome to MrNightVault. Tonight we step into the shadows of the graveyard, a place where the dead don't always stay silent, and every echo tells a story you were never meant to hear. Before we begin, I want to know, and where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Grab a seat, stay close, and don't forget to subscribe, because once the echoes of these 10 terrifying true graveyard horror stories reach you, there's no turning back. And hey, we have a goal this month. 1,000 brave souls to join our Night Vault family. Hit that subscribe button and be part of the journey, if you dare. I've always been drawn to old cemeteries. Something about the stillness, the way history hangs in the air like fog. Most people think it's morbid, but to me it's peaceful. That night I was at Rosewood Cemetery with two friends, Jenna and Mark. It was just past midnight, the full moon spilling silvery light across the cracked gravestones. I don't remember why we even went there. I think it started as a dare, something stupid, teenage curiosity. We were 18, reckless, convinced nothing could scare us. We had parked a few blocks away and walked along the overgrown path. The air smelled damp, like wet leaves and decayed earth. The cemetery was older than the town itself, dating back to the 1800s, and some of the graves looked like they had been forgotten entirely, leaning at odd angles, moss covering the engravings. There was a small creek running along the east edge, its water dark and slow. I remember thinking how quiet it was, unnaturally quiet, like the world had paused. Jenna had a flashlight and she shined it across the gravestones. "Who wants to tell a ghost story?" she said, trying to sound cheerful, but her voice cracked a little. "Not me," Mark muttered, though I caught the grin on his face. He liked to act tough, but I could tell he was already uneasy. We wandered a little deeper, circling near the oldest section. That's when I saw it. A tombstone, small and simple, half buried in dirt with letters barely legible. It read, Eleanor Hayes, 1897-1915. Something about it felt off. I couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way the moonlight caught the edge of the stone, or maybe it was just my imagination. Then I heard it. My name, Talha. I froze. The voice was soft, almost a whisper coming from just behind the grave. I spun around. "Hello?" I called, trying to sound braver than I felt. Nothing, just the wind rustling the dry leaves. "Talha," the voice repeated, this time closer. I swear it sounded like it came from inside my head and behind me at the same time. Very funny. "Jenna?" I said, forcing a laugh, though my stomach had already turned cold. "I'm not," she started, but Mark cut her off. "Let's just leave," he said, his tone serious for once. I hesitated. Something about that tombstone was pulling me in. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe something else. I don't know. I stepped closer. The whisper came again. "Talha, come closer." I stopped dead. Jenna grabbed my arm. "Talha, don't." I looked at the tombstone and my heart stopped. There was a shadow on it. A thin, human-like shape, standing perfectly still, though there was no one there. The shadow didn't belong to any of us. I yanked my arm free. "We're leaving," I said, my voice shaking. Mark didn't argue. He grabbed Jenna's hand and we started running down the path we came from. But as we ran, I could swear the whisper followed me. It wasn't saying my name anymore. Now it was a question. "Why are you here?" We burst out of the cemetery and didn't stop until we reached the streetlights. The town was asleep, everything normal except for the echo in my mind. We didn't speak about it for days. I tried to convince myself it was wind, or maybe a trick of my brain. But deep down I knew it wasn't. Then things started happening at home. Doors would creak open by themselves. I'd hear my name whispered when I was alone. I tried to tell Jenna and Mark, but they laughed it off. "You're just stressed," Jenna said. It escalated 1 week later. I was lying in bed when I felt cold fingers brush my arm. I bolted upright, but the room was empty. The whisper came again, now clearly coming from under my bed. "Talha." I didn't sleep for nights after that. I moved my bed, I left the room lights on, I even stayed at Jenna's house, but it didn't matter. Wherever I went, the whisper followed. Then I realized something. Every night the voice got a little closer. At first it was outside my window, then in the hallway, then in my room right next to my ear. I would wake up to the sound of breathing, slow and deliberate, like someone was just standing there waiting. Mark disappeared one night. I say disappeared, but the truth is we never found him. One evening he called me frantic. He said he had returned to the cemetery alone this time and that someone was waiting for him there. The line went silent for a moment. Then he whispered, barely audible, "They know my name too." The call ended. I called the police, of course, but there was nothing. No evidence. No mark. Just an empty room and his phone left on the bed. I started researching Eleanor Hayes, the girl on that tombstone. Turns out she was 15 when she died in 1915. Her death was never fully explained. Records said she vanished from her home and was found days later in the woods, unresponsive. Some townsfolk said she wasn't fully herself when she returned. She lived a few more months before dying for good. I laughed nervously when I read that, trying to convince myself it was coincidence. But it wasn't. I could feel her watching me. I could feel her pulling me back to that cemetery. One night I had to know. I went back alone this time. The gate creaked when I pushed it open. Fog clung to the ground. The wind whispered my name. I followed the path to Eleanor's tombstone. It was empty. Except for a shadow, it stepped forward. Human, but wrong. Too thin, too tall. Its face was hidden, but I could feel eyes on me. The whisper was in my head now, echoing, overlapping with my own thoughts. Finally, you came back. I ran faster than I ever had, but I could hear it behind me. Close, too close. My legs burned, my lungs ached. I reached the street and it stopped. The shadow didn't follow. I thought it was over. I told myself it was over, but now sometimes I hear it at night. A soft whisper just beyond the edge of hearing. And sometimes in mirrors or in the reflection of windows I see her, Eleanor Hayes, standing there watching. Waiting. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I don't know if she's patient or if she's just letting me think I'm safe. All I know is that the tombstone waits, the shadow waits, and the whisper never truly stops. I don't write this for attention or to scare anyone. I write this because I have to, because if I stop, maybe she'll come for me in a way I can't survive. Maybe she's already here, in some part of the world where I don't see her yet. If you ever hear your name whispered in the dark, don't ignore it. Don't think it's just the wind. Some things are waiting. Some things remember, and sometimes they wait a very long time. I've never been the kind of person to believe in ghosts. I've laughed off urban legends, scoffed at horror movies, and dismissed anyone who told me they felt a presence around them. But what happened to me last year changed all that, and even now I can't quite explain it. I keep telling myself it was all in my head, but every detail is burned into my memory like a photograph I can't delete. It started in early October. I'd recently moved to a small town in the outskirts of Pennsylvania, somewhere far from the city lights I was used to. The town was quiet, so quiet that it almost felt unnatural at first. The streets were lined with old Victorian houses, most of them abandoned, and the local cemetery was on the edge of the main road, half hidden behind overgrown shrubs and iron gates that had long since rusted. I lived with two roommates, Aaron and Lena. Aaron had grown up in this area, so he knew the town and its quirks better than anyone. Lena, like me, was new. We all worked remotely, so our schedules were flexible, but I often took evening walks just to clear my head after long hours in front of the computer. That's how I stumbled into the first unsettling moment. One evening, I decided to take the path by the cemetery. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, and a cool, damp breeze was coming off the field next to it. I always liked walking past the gravestones. There was a strange peace there, even though it was eerie. As I passed the old gates, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. A figure, or maybe just a shadow, appeared to be following me, but whenever I turned, there was nothing there. I shrugged it off. Maybe it was a trick of the fading light. The first real scare happened a few nights later. I was walking home from the small convenience store a few blocks away, carrying a bag of groceries when I felt it again. The sense that someone was behind me. I stopped, bag in hand, and looked over my shoulder. The street was empty, lit only by the flickering yellow of the streetlights. Then I noticed it, a dark figure not more than a few feet behind me, moving in perfect sync with my steps. I froze. My heartbeat started racing, and I swore I could feel its presence growing heavier with every second. I blinked and it was gone. Just like that. I didn't tell Aaron or Lena at first. I thought I was imagining things, but then it started happening more often. The shadow, or whatever it was always just at the edge of my vision. It followed me through streets, past abandoned lots, even into my apartment building once, though I was alone. It never got close enough to touch, but the feeling of being watched became impossible to ignore. One night, Aaron stayed home late working on a freelance project. I was heading back from a quick walk and I decided to take the path behind the cemetery again, trying to calm my nerves. That's when I saw it clearly. It was standing by the old stone mausoleum near the back of the lot. At first I thought it was a man, but there was something off. The way it moved was too smooth, too fluid. It had no discernible features, no face, nothing I could call human. And when I stepped closer, it tilted its head like it was studying me. I froze. "Hello?" I called, my voice barely a whisper. It didn't answer. It didn't need to. The shadow mirrored me exactly. I ran. I don't remember how fast I made it back to the apartment, but when I slammed the door behind me, I could feel the weight of its gaze pressing against it. Aaron didn't believe me. "Shadows don't follow people," he said. Lena shrugged and suggested I might be stressed. But the fear in my chest was real, and I knew it wasn't in my head. Things escalated over the next few weeks. The shadow started appearing inside the apartment. Always in the corner of my eye. Always just out of reach. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night and see it standing silently at the foot of my bed, its featureless form looming in the darkness. I tried to photograph it, record it on my phone, even talk to it, but it never showed up in pictures or video. It was as if the world itself refused to acknowledge it, but I felt it, always, watching, waiting. Then came the night I realized it wasn't just following me, it was learning me. I had a routine. I walked the same path, ate the same dinner, and even sat in the same chair while working. I noticed the shadow began to anticipate my movements. If I paused mid-walk, it paused too. If I ducked into a store, it seemed to linger outside, waiting. It wasn't just mimicking me anymore, it was stalking me. The breaking point happened one stormy night. Rain lashed against the windows and the power went out, leaving our apartment pitch black except for flashes of lightning. I was sitting on the couch with Lena, trying to calm my nerves with some light conversation. Aaron was in the kitchen making tea when we heard it, a soft tapping at the window. At first I thought it was the wind, but then the tapping became deliberate, slow, methodical, counting almost. Tap, pause, tap, pause, tap. I swear to God I could feel it smiling. We didn't want to look, but the sound was too close. I grabbed my phone, using the flashlight to peer toward the window, and there it was. The shadow, pressed against the glass. No features, just a dark, shifting outline. It was looking at me, at us. And then it moved, swift, unnaturally fast, to the far corner of the room. We could see the shape of it stretching along the walls, across the floor. We ran to the bathroom and locked ourselves in. Aaron tried calling the police, but the lines were dead. Lena and I huddled together, listening to the taps and shuffles echoing outside the door. And then silence. We stayed there until morning. When we emerged, the apartment was empty. No signs of forced entry, nothing out of place. But the air was heavy, thick like it had seeped into the walls. After that night, we moved. I couldn't stay, couldn't face it anymore. I packed up my things and left town, leaving the apartment, the streets, even the cemetery behind. But the shadow didn't leave. Even now, months later, I feel it. A flicker in the corner of my vision. A sudden chill when I walk alone. And sometimes when I pass a graveyard or a darkened alley, I swear I can see it standing there waiting, tilting its head like it remembers me. I know it sounds insane. I don't expect anyone to believe me, but I'm telling you this because if you ever feel it, if you ever sense a shadow following your steps, even when you're alone, don't ignore it. Don't look away. And whatever you do, don't run. Because whatever it is, it's always learning, and it's patient. I still don't know if what I experienced was real, but it's haunted me for months. I've debated posting this, thinking people might chalk it up to stress or imagination, but I can't keep it to myself anymore. If you've ever felt that sense of dread that starts small and grows until it's all you can think about, you'll understand. It all started last October. I was living in a small town in upstate New York, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business and nothing really ever happens. I had just taken a weekend job at a local cemetery. Nothing glamorous, just maintenance and upkeep. It was quiet work and I liked it. There's something about being alone among the gravestones that forces you to confront silence in a way city life never does. I was assigned to the east side of the cemetery, a section that wasn't often visited. Older graves, some dating back over a century, moss-covered stones leaning precariously, inscriptions faded by time. One Saturday afternoon, I noticed a freshly dug grave near the back of this section. The dirt mound was neat, almost suspiciously so, and there was no marker yet. Just a small blank headstone leaning against a tree nearby, like someone hadn't gotten around to setting it up. I remember standing there for a while, just staring. It was odd, not because graves are unusual in a cemetery, but because this one looked different, almost too clean, too deliberate. And the soil didn't smell like the damp earth I'd been digging earlier in the week. It smelled dry, almost powdery. I shrugged it off, figured the funeral hadn't happened yet or the body hadn't been placed. That seemed reasonable. Later that evening, after my shift ended, I mentioned it to one of my coworkers, a guy named Dave. He was older, worked the cemetery for decades, knew everything about the grounds. "You saw it, huh?" he said when I described it. "Yeah," I said. "Fresh, but no one's around. No funeral, no flowers. Weird, right?" Dave didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, face tight, like he'd seen something I hadn't. "Sometimes," he said finally, "there are odd burials, private family arrangements. Happens more than you think." "Don't worry about it," I nodded, but I couldn't shake the unease. There was something about that grave that felt wrong. The next morning I went back, planning to check on it again, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The grave, the mound of dirt, the freshly dug indentation in the earth, was gone. Just gone. The soil was smooth, untouched, as if nothing had been disturbed at all. No footprint marks, no tools left behind, no sign that anyone had been there. Even the leaning headstone was gone. I blinked, thinking maybe I had imagined it. But I hadn't. I was careful. I had even taken a photo with my phone the day before. I pulled it up. There it was, the grave. Clearly visible, dirt piled neatly, headstone leaning to one side. And then I looked back at the spot in real life. Nothing. Just an empty patch of grass, older stones nearby, nothing out of place. I showed the photo to Dave. He squinted at it, then frowned. "That's weird," he admitted. "Never seen anything like that. That section hasn't had a burial in months. Maybe you mixed up the rows?" I shook my head. "No. I remember exactly where it was. I walked past it a dozen times this week." He shrugged, looking uncomfortable, and I didn't press it. Over the next few days, I became obsessed. I started visiting the spot multiple times a day, watching, waiting. At first, nothing happened, just the same undisturbed patch of earth. But then strange things began to occur. I started seeing shadows in the corner of my eyes, moving, shifting shapes, always near the spot where the grave had been. Sometimes it would be a figure, like a person crouching behind a stone. Other times it was just a dark smudge against the trees. And every so often, I swore I could hear whispers, faint at first, like the wind brushing through the branches, but always just on the edge of hearing. Never distinct words. One afternoon I was alone there and I saw a man. He was tall, thin, wearing an old coat and a hat pulled low over his face. He stood right where the grave had been. I froze. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge me, just stood there. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. When I blinked, he was gone. Just like that, I started talking to people in town discreetly, asking if anyone had recent burials, if anyone knew of private plots. No one did.
One woman who ran the local funeral home gave me a look that made my stomach twist. "You're talking about the west section, right?"
she asked. "No, east, far back near the old tree line." Her face went pale. "There haven't been any burials there in decades. People stopped using that section. Some say it's cursed." "Cursed?" She lowered her voice. "Strange things happen. Graves vanish. People see figures at night. Best not to go there." That should have scared me off, but I couldn't. I had to know. One evening, I stayed late, past sundown. The cemetery was silent except for the rustle of leaves. I positioned myself near the spot where the grave had been. Hours passed. I saw nothing, just the shadows of trees stretching long in the fading light. Then around midnight I heard it, the soft scrape of soil like something being moved. I held my breath. The mound began to rise slowly, almost imperceptibly, as if the earth itself were lifting. I backed away, heart pounding. And then I saw it, a hand, pale, almost translucent, pushing through the dirt. The rest of the body followed, emerging from the ground as if it had been buried just moments ago. Even though I knew it hadn't existed yesterday, I stumbled backward, tripping over a root, and the figure froze. It wasn't moving like a normal person. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet being yanked on invisible strings. And it stared at me, or at least where my eyes were, with a blank, empty expression. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't go back. The next day I told Dave what I'd seen. He looked pale. "You shouldn't have gone back," he said. "I tried to warn you. Some things, some graves, they're not meant to be disturbed. Not by the living." I quit the cemetery the next week. I tried to put it out of my mind. But the memories wouldn't leave. Every night I'd dream of that patch of earth, the hand emerging from the soil, the eyes staring. Months later, I drove past the cemetery on a quiet road. The east section was just as it had always been, peaceful, calm, but I swear as I looked closer, the earth in that spot seemed to shimmer as if breathing, and I thought I saw the faint outline of a mound. I don't know if that grave is still there or if it will ever be. I don't know if what I saw was a person, a ghost, or something else entirely. All I know is this: I can never go back. I can't drive past that cemetery without feeling my chest tighten, my stomach twist. That place isn't just haunted by memories or stories. It's haunted by something real, something that moves in the dark, and sometimes late at night I hear it, a soft scrape in the distance like soil being disturbed, and I know somehow that grave is still waiting. I can't stop thinking about it. I don't want to, but I can't help it because I saw it vanish once, and I know it can come back. I've never been particularly superstitious. I like to think I'm practical, someone who relies on logic over gut feelings. But the events I'm about to recount, well, they changed that. I still don't know if I want to fully believe what happened. Maybe I'll never believe it, but I know it was real, and it happened to me. It started in late October, right around the time the nights start to get colder and the fog rolls in early. My friends and I, 3 of us in total, were driving through the outskirts of our town, mostly to kill time and because we'd been joking about checking out the abandoned parts of the cemetery. My friend Jake had discovered an old map online that supposedly showed forgotten sections of the town cemetery that weren't open to the public anymore. I remember the night clearly. The streetlights flickered as we drove down the back roads, the fog thickening with each turn. Emma, sitting in the passenger seat, kept fiddling with her phone, scrolling through the same social media feed over and over and muttering about how creepy the place would be. Jake in the back was unusually quiet. He wasn't usually the shy type, but something in his eyes that night felt different. We parked near the oldest section of the cemetery, where the map indicated a forgotten gate. The gate itself was barely standing, rusted shut, overgrown with weeds. I remember thinking how surreal it was, like we'd stepped back in time. The air was heavy, the kind that makes your skin feel like it's shrinking. We hesitated at the gate. "Do we really want to do this?" Emma asked. Her voice trembled slightly, which was unusual for her. She wasn't afraid of much. "Come on, it's just an old cemetery," I said, forcing a casual laugh. "How scary can it be?" Jake just shook his head and muttered, "You guys go first." So reluctantly, we squeezed through the gate, brushing against sharp rust and spider webs. The path beyond was narrow, lined with old tombstones leaning at odd angles. Moss had claimed most of them, and some were barely readable. A faint smell of damp earth lingered, the kind that reminds you of a grave without needing to look. As we walked, I noticed the silence. Not just the lack of traffic or people, but a deeper, heavier silence. It felt like the world had been muted just for this place. Even our footsteps seemed swallowed by the air. At first we joked, trying to lighten the mood. Jake pointed at a tombstone with a name partially eroded away. "See? Someone didn't want to be remembered," he said. But there was a nervous edge to his voice I couldn't ignore. After about 15 minutes, we came to the oldest section of the graveyard, where the trees grew close together, their branches weaving into a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. That's when I felt it, a sharp, icy grip on my shoulder. I spun around instantly, expecting one of them to be messing with me. "Very funny," I said, my voice louder than I intended. Nobody was there. Emma gasped behind me. Did you feel that?" Jake's face had gone pale. "Yeah," he whispered, looking around. "It's cold." I shook my shoulder, trying to dismiss it. Probably just a branch or something. But even as I said it, the hairs on my neck stood on end. We kept walking, moving deeper into the shadows. The path seemed longer than before, twisting in ways I didn't remember from the map. Every now and then I thought I heard something following us, a faint rustling, like someone dragging their feet over dead leaves, but every time I turned, no one was there. Emma started talking about leaving. "Maybe we should just go back," she said. Her voice sounded small, fragile. "I don't like this." Jake nodded, and I could see the tension in his jaw. But we kept moving forward, driven by that weird combination of fear and stubborn curiosity. It was near an old mausoleum that things got truly strange. The building was small, covered in black ivy, and its door was slightly ajar. Inside it smelled of mold and decay, though nothing inside seemed rotten. The air was unnaturally cold, colder than it should have been even for that night. I remember it clearly. Walking in, the floorboards creaking beneath our feet. Emma's flashlight barely illuminated the interior, and shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. Then we heard it, a whisper. It wasn't a word, not exactly. Just a long, drawn-out sigh, like someone exhaling after holding their breath for years. "We froze. Did you hear that?" Emma whispered. Jake swallowed hard. "Yeah. We need to go." I took a step forward, irrationally curious. The whisper came again, closer this time from the far corner of the room. I felt my heart pounding, my legs heavy. I swear I saw a movement, a shadow that wasn't ours. Then I felt it again. That cold hand, but this time it wasn't just on my shoulder. It grazed my back, light, almost playful in its grip, yet unmistakably cold. My breath caught in my throat. I spun around. "Nobody," Emma screamed. I grabbed her arm. "We're leaving. Now." We ran out of the mausoleum, not looking back. The fog seemed to thicken around us, pressing against our skin like liquid. When we reached the gate, we all froze. The path back to the car was gone. Not disappeared exactly, but warped. The gate was farther than it should have been, the trees closer together. The grave markers seemed to have shifted. Panic set in. Emma was shaking, and Jake's eyes were darting around like he was seeing things we weren't. "It's not right," he muttered. "The map. None of this matches." Then a figure appeared at the edge of the fog. It was tall, thin, and completely black, like someone had draped a shadow over a human frame. It didn't move toward us, not yet, but it didn't need to. Its presence alone made the air heavy. I felt that hand again, this time on my arm. Ice shot up my body, paralyzing me for a moment. I could feel the tips of fingers, impossibly cold, digging just slightly into my skin. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. We ran. I don't know how we found the car, but somehow we did. Emma nearly tripped over herself, and Jake slammed the keys into the ignition. The engine roared, and we didn't stop until we were back on the main road, lights of the town finally piercing the fog. We didn't talk much on the drive back. The streetlights, the familiar houses, the mundane sounds of the town. None of it felt real. It was like we'd returned from a place that existed only for a moment, yet had already left its mark on us. Since that night, none of us have been back to that cemetery. Emma refuses to even drive past it. Jake won't talk about it without shaking, and I can still feel that hand sometimes, just barely when I'm alone. Light enough to make me shiver, impossible to touch, but unmistakably there. I've tried to rationalize it, of course. Maybe it was wind, maybe my imagination, maybe some trick of the light. But deep down, I know better. That hand wasn't friendly. That shadow wasn't lost. They were waiting, watching, and maybe they still are. Some nights when the fog rolls in early, I swear I see a figure standing just past the edge of my yard. A dark silhouette, impossibly tall. And sometimes, just as I'm about to close the blinds, I feel it. A cold brush across my shoulder, lighter than a whisper, yet chilling me to the bone. I don't know what it wants, or why it follows me. But I do know this, it isn't done. And I don't think it ever will be. I've always been drawn to old cemeteries. There's something about the quiet, the way the air smells faintly of earth and decay that feels grounding. Not in a morbid way, I just like the history, I guess. My friends never understood it. Even my best friend Marcus always thought I was weird for taking night walks through graveyards. But I didn't care. It was peaceful, and more than anything, it was empty. Or at least I thought it was. It was late October when it happened. The kind of cold where your breath hangs in the air like smoke. Marcus had been reluctant, but I convinced him to come with me to the old cemetery on the outskirts of town. It wasn't a popular place. Most people stuck to the newer cemeteries near the city. But this one was old, abandoned in places with weathered stones leaning like tired old people. It was perfect. We arrived just as the sun disappeared, leaving a bruised purple sky. The air was damp and the ground squished beneath our boots. The cemetery stretched further than I realized. Rows and rows of gray stones, some so old the inscriptions had worn away entirely. There was a chill in the air that had nothing to do with the weather. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Marcus muttered, glancing around nervously. "Relax," I said, trying to sound confident. "It's just a cemetery. Nothing's gonna happen." But as we walked deeper, I started to feel it, the sense that we weren't alone. It began subtly, a rustle in the bushes, the sound of a branch snapping somewhere behind us, distant enough that it could have been an animal. My stomach tightened. Marcus noticed too. I could see it in the way he kept looking over his shoulder. We reached a section that was even older than the rest, the stones crumbling, moss covering their surfaces like green fur. That's when I saw it, a figure. At first I thought it was a trick of the shadows. Sitting on a tombstone, hunched slightly, it seemed almost casual, but there was something off. I couldn't make out details, just a silhouette pale against the dim light. And then it laughed. Softly. It wasn't the kind of laugh you hear in movies, the exaggerated horror type. This was quiet, low, almost intimate. Like it knew you were there. I froze. Marcus grabbed my arm. "Did you hear that?" "Yes," I whispered. The figure didn't move in the way a normal person would. It just shifted closer. I blinked and it seemed nearer than before, though there was no sound of footsteps. Marcus saw it too, and I swear he turned completely pale. "Let's go," he said, urgency creeping into his voice. I nodded, but my curiosity was stabbing me. Something about that figure was wrong. And yet I couldn't look away. We started walking back toward the entrance, but the figure followed. Every time I blinked, it seemed closer. Always sitting, always laughing softly. I told myself it was my imagination, that it couldn't move like that. But Marcus's quiet gasps told me he saw it too. By the time we reached the main path, it was gone. Or at least we couldn't see it anymore. My heart was pounding and I could feel Marcus shaking beside me. I don't think we should have come here," he said. "Yeah," I admitted. "Maybe we shouldn't." We left the cemetery quickly, the sound of our footsteps swallowed by the night. But as we walked to the car, I felt it again. That soft laughter echoing in my mind. It was subtle, almost like a memory, but horrifying all the same. I tried to forget about it. I went home, drank some water, and told myself it was just stress. The creepy atmosphere getting to me. But that night I dreamt of it. It was sitting on my bed this time. I woke up gasping, my sheets twisted around me. Nothing was there. But the laughter lingered faintly in the corner of my room. I started seeing it in small ways after that. At first I convinced myself it was paranoia. Shadows that looked like it. Glimpses from the corner of my eye. But then I realized I couldn't escape it. One evening I was walking home from work when I saw it standing across the street. Not moving, just standing, watching. Its pale face, indistinct but wrong somehow, grinned at me. I froze, cars passed by honking, and it didn't even flinch. Then, without moving its legs, it was suddenly on the sidewalk behind me. I ran. I didn't stop until I was inside my apartment, locking every door, windows closed tight. But when I peeked outside, I saw it again, sitting on the curb, head tilted, laughing softly. I called Marcus. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, you there?" he asked, nervous. Have you seen it?" I asked. Yeah, he said slowly. "It's been following me too. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just Marcus." That's when I realized the laughing figure wasn't tied to the cemetery. It followed people. It watched. And it didn't need roads, doors, or windows. We tried everything. Moving, changing our routines, avoiding being outside at night. But it didn't matter. Always there. Always laughing softly. I even thought about going to the police, but how do you report a shadow that moves impossibly? They'd laugh at you and the figure would laugh louder. Weeks passed. It escalated. The soft laugh turned into faint whisper sometimes, barely audible, like it was speaking to us directly. I stopped sleeping. Marcus did too. We became shadows of ourselves, afraid to blink, afraid to close our eyes, and then one night, I saw it differently. It wasn't laughing at me anymore. It was laughing at us, at everything we loved, everything we were. Sitting on the edge of my kitchen counter, it tilted its head and whispered something I couldn't quite make out, but I felt it in my bones. It was a warning. Not about me, but about everyone. I don't go outside anymore. Marcus barely leaves his room. The laughter follows us everywhere. And sometimes when I blink in the darkness, I see it closer than it should possibly be. Sitting, always sitting, grinning, laughing softly, waiting. I don't know what it wants. Maybe it wants to scare us forever. Maybe it wants something worse. I don't know if I'll ever leave this apartment alive. But I do know this: if you see a figure sitting quietly, laughing softly, don't blink, because every time you do, it's closer. And when it stops laughing, it's already too late. I've always been a light sleeper, the kind of person who can wake up at the faintest creak of the floorboards. I used to laugh about it until the night that changed everything. It was a regular Thursday in late November, the kind of cold, damp evening where the fog from the nearby river creeps into your street, curling around the streetlights and making shadows stretch in odd, unnatural ways. I had just finished my shift at the diner, which meant I was walking home alone. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it, but that night, something felt off. I lived in a quiet part of town, the kind where neighbors knew each other's names but rarely stepped outside after dark. My apartment was a 10-minute walk from the diner, through a series of narrow streets lined with old brick buildings that leaned like they were whispering secrets to each other. I had headphones in, listening to a true crime podcast, trying to shake off the fatigue of a long shift. That's when I first heard it. Footsteps. At first, I thought nothing of it. My street is quiet, but it's not unusual for someone else to be out late, walking their dog or heading home from a night shift like me. I slowed my pace, trying to see if the footsteps matched mine, or if they were just some random echo. That's when I noticed it. They were too precise. Each step behind me landed at the exact same rhythm as mine. I stopped. I held my breath. The sound didn't. It's impossible to describe the kind of creeping panic that takes over when you're sure someone is there, but you can't see them. I turned sharply to my left, swinging my arm as if I could physically hit whatever might be there. Nothing. Empty street. Only fog and the faint orange glow of a broken street lamp. I shrugged it off, trying to convince myself I was just tired, maybe imagining things. I started walking again, faster this time. My sneakers slapped against the cracked pavement, and there it was, the echo perfectly timed. Right behind me. I reached for my phone to call someone, anyone, but my hands were shaking too badly to type. I tried to tell myself it was probably someone else walking behind me, maybe another night shifter. But there were no other shadows in the fog, no distant hum of a car approaching, nothing. Just me. And the footsteps. I made it to the corner where my street turned sharply toward my apartment building. I could see the warm lights of my front door in the distance. Relief washed over me briefly. If I could just reach the building, I'd be safe. I heard a soft laugh. It was low, almost a whisper carried on the wind, but it was human, and it was behind me. I froze. My phone slipped from my hands, clattering on the pavement. The footsteps stopped, and for the first time I noticed something strange. The air behind me felt heavy, almost solid. Like it wasn't just the fog wrapping around the street, but something else. Pressing closer, waiting, I forced myself to move. Picking up the phone and dialing my roommate Jake, he answered groggily. "Hey man, I'm almost home," I whispered, trying to keep my voice calm. "Almost home?" Jake asked, his tone suddenly alert. "You sound nervous. What's going on?" "I think someone's following me," I said, my voice trembling. "I can hear footsteps. And I swear I heard a laugh just now." "Stay on the line, I'm locking the door," he said. "Just keep walking. Don't turn around." I did as he said, moving as fast as I could without breaking into a run. My eyes darted everywhere, searching for the faintest sign of movement in the fog. The street twisted and the light from my building grew closer. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I almost reached the steps to the entrance when it started again. Footsteps, matching mine, faster this time, louder, closer. I dropped my bag and bolted. The front door of the building came into view. Jake swung it open just as I reached it, and I slammed it behind me, panting. He locked it, slid the deadbolt, and pulled me inside. "Did you see it?" I asked, gasping. "See what?" "The footsteps, something," he frowned. "There's nobody out there, Talha. The street's empty." "You're shaking like crazy. Maybe you just got spooked." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But my stomach churned. I had felt it. Something was there. Something that had been pacing me, laughing at me just out of reach. I tried to sleep that night, lying in bed with the lights on, phone clutched in my hand. But every little creak in the building made me jump. I kept hearing faint taps from the hallway outside, footsteps that weren't mine, just at the edge of perception. The next day, I told Jake I'd walk with him to the diner for the rest of the week. He agreed, probably thinking it was just me being paranoid. But nothing happened during the day. Sunlight always makes fear more tolerable. Nightfall, though, that's when the world feels hungry. 2 nights later, it happened again. I was walking home, this time with a friend from work, Lisa. She noticed me glancing over my shoulder too often. "Relax," she said. "You're imagining things." I wanted to believe her. But the moment we turned down my street, I heard it again. Footsteps behind me, matching mine. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, gripping Lisa's arm. "What?" she asked, looking around. "They're behind me. Someone's behind me." We picked up our pace. The fog had rolled in heavier than before, thick and suffocating. And then I heard it, the laugh again. Low, deliberate, right behind us. Lisa stopped. "Talha, I swear, I don't hear anything." My stomach dropped. It wasn't supposed to be real. I couldn't be losing my mind, could I? We ran the last block to my building. I turned the key, pulled the door open, and we bolted inside. I slammed the door behind us and leaned against it, shaking. "Okay, maybe it's some guy playing a joke," Lisa said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Or not," I muttered. The next few weeks, I avoided walking alone. I took cabs, rides from friends, anything I could. But the footsteps didn't go away. Sometimes I'd hear them when I was at home, when the apartment was empty. Sometimes, late at night, I'd be on the phone with Jake, telling him I could hear it pacing just outside my door, and he'd hear nothing. One night, a week later, I was too tired to stay out. I had to walk home. I took my usual route, headphones in, phone ready. The street was empty, quiet, the fog rolling lazily in the lamplight. Then I heard it, footsteps. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened. They slowed. They paused, and then, right behind me, the whisper. Finally. I spun around. Nothing. The street was empty, the fog thick. My heart thumped, a hard, relentless drum. I bolted, reached my building, slid the key in the lock, pulled the door open, slammed it behind me, and then I swear, I heard them stop outside, footsteps, waiting, patient. That was 3 months ago. I've moved since then to a different city, different street, different life. But sometimes when I walk alone, when the fog is just right, I can still hear it. Footsteps matching mine. And I know somewhere it's still following, waiting for the moment I stop. I don't know if it's human. I don't know if it's alive. But I know one thing. It remembers my footsteps and it never forgets. It started on the edge of town, where the streets give way to a tangle of woods that nobody really goes into anymore. I'd just moved into my uncle's old house. He'd passed away suddenly, and the place had been empty for months. It was the kind of house that seemed almost forgotten, like the walls themselves had settled into a kind of quiet despair. I was 24 at the time, and honestly, I didn't care much for that sort of thing. I needed somewhere cheap to live while I figured my life out, and this house fit the bill. The first few nights were uneventful, just the usual creaks and groans of an old building. But by the third night, I started noticing small things, shadows moving at the corner of my eyes, doors that were closed when I was sure I'd left them open. I chalked it up to fatigue or the house settling, but the unease lingered. A week in, I decided to explore the woods behind the house. It was overgrown, tangled with brambles, and smelled of damp earth and decay. I had a small flashlight and a camera, mostly just to make my walks feel purposeful. But I wandered further than I probably should have. That's when I found it. A small grave half sunken into the earth with no headstone, no marker, nothing but a single stuffed animal laid carefully on top. A frayed, threadbare bear, its fur matted with age. I crouched there for a long time looking at it. Who had buried a child out here? And why leave no name? The forest around me was quiet, unnaturally quiet, like even the birds had abandoned it. I took a picture, mostly out of curiosity, and then hurried back to the house, feeling a shiver I couldn't shake. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard it. A soft cry, barely audible, like a child calling for someone. I sat up, straining to hear. The sound came from outside, from the direction of the woods. I told myself it was an animal, a fox or something, but the sound, it was different. There was a tone to it, a pleading quality that made my stomach churn. I didn't sleep much that night. By morning I felt ridiculous, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I mentioned it to my neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Harper, who'd lived in the town all her life. She gave me a long, unreadable look and said nothing at first. "You shouldn't go wandering in those woods," she finally said. "Not since, well, years ago." I pressed her, asking what she meant. She sighed and looked away, muttering something about a missing child, a girl who disappeared decades ago, and how no one ever found her. She wouldn't say more, and I didn't push. That was the kind of town secret that people keep, I realized. Over the next few days, the occurrences grew. Objects in my house would move slightly, just enough to notice, like my keys on the counter being shifted, or a chair slightly askew. The crying returned at night, always soft, always coming from the direction of the woods. Sometimes it was accompanied by whispers barely there, almost like the wind itself was speaking, but I could never make out words. One evening, I decided to go back to the grave, hoping maybe I could understand what was going on. I brought a small lantern this time, trying to be cautious. The forest was heavier than before, the air thick with the smell of rot and wet leaves. When I reached the grave, the bear was gone. In its place was a small handprint pressed into the soil, tiny and delicate, as if a child had touched it moments ago. I froze. That handprint hadn't been there before. The feeling of being watched came over me like a wave, and I spun around, shining my lantern through the trees. Nothing. But the crying started again, closer now, almost right behind me. I stumbled backward, tripping over roots, my heart pounding. It led me back to the house, though I didn't realize it until I was inside, slamming the door and locking it. The crying stopped, but the sense of presence didn't. I started sleeping with the lights on, always glancing toward the darkened corners of the rooms, expecting to see something. Anyone watching. A week later, my friend Mark came to visit. I needed someone sane, someone who could tell me I wasn't going crazy. Mark was skeptical at first, brushing off my concerns as stress or imagination. But I made him come with me to the grave, hoping seeing it himself would convince him. When we reached the site, the soil had been disturbed again. This time the stuffed bear was back, sitting neatly on the ground where it had been before. The air was colder here, the trees closing in. Mark frowned. "This is weird," he said. "I mean, it's creepy, but it's not supernatural, right?" I didn't answer. The crying started again, and this time Mark heard it too. His face went pale, his usual bravado gone. "Okay," he said, voice tight. That's not normal." We didn't stay long. But when we got back to the house, I realized something terrifying. The windows, all of them, were smeared with dirt. Tiny handprints pressed against the glass like someone, or something, had been watching us the entire time we were outside. From that night on, things escalated. The whispers became more distinct, almost words I couldn't fully understand. Sometimes I would catch glimpses of a small figure in the corners of my eyes, always retreating when I turned to look. Objects moved on their own, doors would slam shut, and the crying never stopped. It became a part of my nightly routine, a background to the heavy dread that settled in my chest. One night, desperate, I decided to confront it. I went back to the grave with Mark, carrying a flashlight and the courage I could muster. The forest seemed alive, shadows stretching toward us, wind whispering through the branches like hushed voices. As we reached the site, the soil shifted, and from it emerged a small, pale face, eyes wide and hollow. The bear lay at its feet. I froze. Mark grabbed my arm, whispering to run, but I couldn't move. The child looked at us, expressionless, and then spoke, not in words, but in a sound that echoed in my mind, a low, mournful wail that was both pleading and accusing. The forest seemed to pulse with it, the trees bending inward, the shadows stretching to swallow us. I don't know how we got back to the house. Mark says he dragged me, but my memories are hazy, fragmented. When we finally locked the door behind us, the crying stopped, for the first time in weeks, but the sense of presence didn't. And sometimes at night I still hear it, the faintest sob, the softest whisper. I never went back to the grave after that night. I moved out of the house shortly after, taking an apartment in town. But the image of that small, hollow-eyed child stays with me. Sometimes in the corner of my vision I think I see it, always watching, always waiting. I've tried to tell myself it was grief, that I was imagining things, that it was the stress of moving and isolation, but I don't believe that anymore. And the worst part is that I think the child hasn't forgotten me, because sometimes when I'm alone in my apartment I hear it. That soft cry, the same one from the woods, and I swear I see a small hand pressed against my window, waiting, pleading, asking me to come back. I don't know who she was or why she was left alone in the forest. I don't know what she wants or what she'll do if I ever go back. All I know is this: some things that are forgotten should stay forgotten. I've always considered myself a skeptic when it comes to ghost stories. Haunted houses, restless spirits, things that go bump in the night. I never believed in any of it. But after what happened that night at the old Green Hollow Cemetery, I've had to reconsider. Even now, months later, I can't stop thinking about it, and I still can't explain what I saw. It started on a late October evening. My friends Marcus and Ellie and I were driving back from a small town festival about 20 minutes outside our city. The fog had started rolling in just as the sun dipped below the horizon, turning the roads slick and the streetlights into glowing orbs that seemed to float in the haze. Marcus, being the adventurous type, suggested we take a shortcut through the back roads, one that cut behind an abandoned cemetery known as Green Hollow. I remember Ellie's first words when Marcus mentioned it. "Are you kidding? That place has been empty for years. People say it's weird there." I laughed it off, but deep down I felt that familiar twinge of unease. The cemetery wasn't just abandoned, it had a reputation. Old newspapers spoke of missing hikers decades ago, odd lights spotted at night, and local rumors of a lantern that wandered through the graves, unclaimed, like some lost soul was holding it. Of course, none of us took any of that seriously at the time. We parked the car at the edge of the cemetery's wrought iron gates. The fog was thick now, clinging to the ground and curling around the tombstones. You could barely make out shapes 10 feet away. Marcus, of course, was grinning like a kid. "Come on, don't tell me you're scared." Ellie shook her head but followed us anyway. I stayed near the middle, flashlight in hand, trying to ignore the feeling crawling up my spine. The cemetery was silent except for the crunch of dead leaves beneath our boots. Every so often, the fog would shift and I'd catch what looked like a shadow moving between the stones. Though when I blinked, there was nothing there. We wandered deeper, exploring the older section where the stones were cracked, leaning, some completely toppled. That's when I saw it. A faint light bobbed between the graves, just barely visible through the fog. At first, I thought it was another flashlight. Maybe someone else was trespassing, but there was no one there. The light moved slowly, almost gliding above the ground, drifting from one gravestone to the next. "Do you see that?" I whispered, my voice catching. Marcus squinted. "See what?" "It's probably just a reflection of the moon on something." "No," I said. "It's moving. Look, it's going from that old section over there to there." I pointed toward the far corner where the oldest graves were, covered in moss and barely readable. Ellie's face went pale. I think we should go back." I wanted to agree, but part of me was curious, irrationally drawn toward the light. Marcus, of course, didn't hesitate. He started walking toward it. "Come on, it's just a lantern." "Probably someone messing with us." We followed him, our steps muffled by the thick fog. The light bobbed ahead, slow, deliberate. It moved in a way that didn't make sense for someone carrying it. It floated too smoothly, almost like it had a will of its own. By the time we reached the center of the oldest section, the lantern was close enough that we could see it clearly. A brass lantern, the kind with a glass casing, and inside a single flame burned. But there was no one holding it. No hand, no body, nothing but the light. We froze. I felt my heartbeat hammering in my chest. Marcus tried to laugh, a nervous, forced sound. "Okay, that's weird." Suddenly, the light darted toward us too quickly and stopped just a few feet away. And then, as if the lantern had sensed us, the flame flickered violently, casting long shadows that danced across the broken tombstones. I could swear I saw shapes moving in the shadows, figures crouching, watching us, but every time I blinked, there was nothing there. Ellie grabbed my arm. "We shouldn't be here. Let's go." I wanted to obey, but Marcus had a fascination with the lantern. "Wait," he said. "I just want to see it." "It's probably someone playing a prank, right?" I barely had time to argue when the lantern floated closer, and I realized something terrifying. It wasn't just moving, it was responding to us. When we backed away, it advanced. When we moved forward, it receded, maintaining a distance of exactly a few feet. It was like it was aware we were there. Then came the sound, a whisper, soft at first, carried by the fog. It wasn't words I could understand, just a low, breathy hiss that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The hair on my arm stood on end. "Did you hear that?" Ellie whispered, her voice trembling. Marcus, pale now, nodded. Yeah, I hear it." The lantern drifted closer, and suddenly the whispering stopped. The silence was worse than the sound. It pressed down on us, thick, suffocating. And then I saw it, a figure or maybe just a shadow crouched behind a gravestone. Its head tilted unnaturally, eyes reflecting the lantern's flame. But when I blinked, it was gone. Panic set in. We turned to run, but the fog seemed thicker now, the path twisting in ways that didn't make sense. We could barely see the car, though it was only 100 feet away. The lantern hovered ahead, blocking our escape. Then I felt it. A chill that wasn't just the night air, a cold that sank into my bones like a hand pressing against my chest. Ellie screamed and tripped. Marcus helped her up, but the lantern didn't move. It just stayed there, hovering, flame flickering. And then the whispers came back, louder this time, circling us, rising in pitch until it felt like the air itself was vibrating. "Go back. Go," they seemed to say. Not words really, just an impression, a command. We bolted. I don't know how we made it out of that cemetery. The fog seemed to part just enough for us to find the car. Marcus slammed the door, started the engine, and we didn't stop driving until the lights of the town were in front of us. We didn't speak for the rest of the night. None of us slept. Even the next day, the memory of that floating lantern haunted me. I tried to rationalize it. A prank, an optical illusion, sleep deprivation. But Ellie and Marcus both insist they saw it too. A week later, I drove past Green Hollow on my own, trying to convince myself to put it behind me. The fog had rolled in again, heavy and low, and for a moment from the corner of my eye I saw it, the lantern drifting between the graves. No one was there. But the flame burned steadily, like it was waiting. And I realized with a sinking feeling that it wasn't waiting for me to leave. It was waiting for me to come back.